Hi, I'm Amy Cardoso, and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, and our interviewer, Leah Constantine, speaks with Anthony Hernandez about his exhibition, Discarded, Photographs by Anthony Hernandez. Now for Art This Week.
Hi, I'm here with Anthony Hernandez to talk about his exhibition Discarded at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art. Thank you for joining us today.
Great, nice to be here.
Great. Well, I would like to begin by asking just kind of a general question about the subject matter of these photographs, what they mean to you, and what is their timeline as they persist to your history of photography?
Well, this is the most recent body of work that I finished in May of last year, and it actually started at the end of 2011 and really kicked off at the beginning of 2012 and ended, like I said, in May of 2015, just because we were planning the show and that's the way it worked out. But the actual body of work actually started some time ago, but it didn't actually. It started me because I started thinking about these outlying areas outside of LA that I wanted to photograph, and especially this area, which is an interesting place, Mojave, because I always drive through Mojave because my wife and I live in Idaho part of the year. So we do this drive between Idaho and LA, and this one area, Mojave, is a place I've been thinking about for a number of years, but we only drive through it, and I never stopped to try to photograph. So when this body of work started, I could actually start photographing in this place, and that's how everything kind of came together. So it's a process, a long process.
And how has your history with California been reflected in these works, because a lot of them do capture things that we don't typically see or think of when we think of California?
Well, for me, it's these outlying areas. It's a way of looking at. Well, I've made so much work in LA, but I have made a couple of pictures outside of. In this area, but black and white years ago in 1979. And it's a way of, you might say, discovering another part of an area near where I live, even though it's maybe sometimes 2 or 3 hours distance in terms of driving. But I really wanted to look around, and the only way you actually can do that is you actually have to just drive to places you've never been. And that driving, that experience is part of the discovery or part of the process of making these kinds of pictures. For instance, this particular picture is, if we were standing in front of this picture, this is actually a road, but it's a dirt road. But on the other side of this is a small, very small, poor trailer park. This is the back end of a trailer park, and that doesn't show up in the picture, but these oranges were actually thrown there by somebody living right next to this trailer park. I mean, living in a trailer park. And the reason I'm interested in, I want to talk about this one picture, is because I've been trying to photograph in this trailer park for a number of times, never making actually any pictures that worked. And only one time that I drove around, and as I was leaving, this wasn't there before, I made this picture. And so it's a process of going back again and again to some of these sites. And this one was a perfect example of finally making a picture that I was very happy about, And so it's one of those, like I said, one of those discoveries. Even though I've been to this place many times, I hadn't made a picture that worked for me, and now I did. So I was very happy about that.
And you mentioned before your black and white photography, and we see here a lot of color that's being used. Can you explain your transition between black and white and color? Was that a choice between cameras, or was that a choice with subject matter?
Well, actually, my first color work was 1984 of portraits of people on Rodeo Drive. That happened to be the last body of work that was about people. There's a long story about that. But anyway, from that point on, that color, I never went back to black and white. And what really started the color work was outside of Las Vegas, a place called Sunrise Mountain. Anyway, it's a place where people go and target practice. And I started photographing the evidence on the desert floor of broken glass and parts of dolls and different things that people had gone out and actually shot. And so those pictures developed a way of looking at, you might say, what people do in certain landscapes, certain areas. And I've been continuing that for, since that time. So I never went back to black and white, and the color is just color from that point on. In other words, whatever the subject is, and I've been using, like, this is a square format camera. This is a 6x7, that's a 4x5. So I've been working in 3 different formats in color and in a very fluid way. And I really like that way of working, and I still shoot real film, even though all the transparencies, whether it's a 2 1/4 or 4x5 or 6x7, they're all scanned, and then digitally the prints are made by a printer, Michael Wilder, who's been printing for me for a long time.
So we're here with a very interesting work of art that kind of sets itself apart from the other photographs in this exhibition, mostly because it is not much of an architectural photograph, but a portrait of a man that you've captured. Can you tell us a little bit how it contributes to the narrative of this exhibition and how it stands out?
Yeah, this is made in outside of a town, and it's on the map of Brawley, California. And so when I was driving, actually from Texas, from Austin, this is the beginning of 2012. Anyway, I was driving, heading toward the Salton Sea, and this bus, he lived in this bus, was parked next to you might just say the desert road, just out nowhere. And I had driven past it. And what happened is I thought that, you don't see the picture of the bus, but the whole bus. But it was so, it had this huge platform on top, and it had all this graffiti of different things. So I turned around to go and check out this bus. And when I went back to it, this man, had been on the other side of it walking around. And when he came around, because I parked, I asked him if I could take a picture of his bus. He said, sure. So I took a picture of his bus. And as I was leaving to continue photographing somewhere else, I felt, I spoke with him, and he was not in very good health. And what happened is that I'd given him $20. And he was so surprised that I'd given him this $20. He was so excited, actually, that he said, let me give you something. And I said, okay. Well, I was ready to leave. My car was here. He had to shuffle back, and he was moving very slowly back into his bus. And he went back into his bus, and I had to wait for him right in front of his bus. And finally he came out, stood there, and gave me a flyer. And the flyer was, it was so mimeographed so many times you could barely read it. But what it did say was Jesus something. And so when I was standing there and he gave me that flyer, he said, do you mind if you don't move, if I could take a picture of you? He said, sure. Ran back to my car, set up my camera. I only had one holder left. I only had 2 shots on my 4x5. And this format, by the way, this long format, is not a cropped. What it is, I customized my 4x5, so it's not a 4x5, it's a 3x5 in the cavity of the camera. So this is exactly what I saw on my camera. And it's the first time I've used it. So I very quickly made this picture, and I didn't get the film back. And when I got the film back, I mean, I could actually see what I got. And it was great, but it's a photographic moment, but it's also a place where outside in the desert areas, out in this area, there are a lot of people that are, you might say, camped out in this no man's land because there's nobody that's going to bother you. So he's living in his bus. He doesn't move around that much because of his condition. And I just made this portrait of one person, but the area is this area near the Salton Sea where I made a lot of other pictures. And people like him are nomads, you might say, in this area where lots of people live during the part of the year when it's not so hot.
Can we talk about your printing process with this as well? You talk about how you get the film back, and that's kind of how you can decide from there if you want to print it, but how do you decide to print it this large, and how are you able to approach that?
Well, my printer, who lives in Montana, when I sent him the transparency, and this is the format that I got, well, what we first do is we make a small proof, like a 10 by 10 or a 10 by 12 proof of it, and we're working on it, and we may be essentially the areas this might be a little hot. So what we're generally doing is everything is being evened out so that when you see the picture all at once, you see it, there's nothing that's going to distract you. Let's say if this was so white, your eye would go there. So the idea is that everything is the picture is complete. And everything in that picture, there's something there to you might say, a detail, whether it's the bird, this metal, the framing exactly, even his little towel in front of his face. And so we even everything out so that everything is interesting in the picture to see, even obviously his feet. And that's a process that takes a little while because all the small proofs are done. It may be 3 or 4 proofs are done before we actually say, well, let's make a big one, a large one. This is, I think, 44 by 70 something. Anyway, we make the first large one, and sometimes the first large one isn't correct. There's something that's off. And then we'll make another adjustment with another small proof, and then make another one. And then that might be the final proof. And this now, if I want to reprint it, it's all done. And I actually have printed now 3 of these. That size for him, we decided it would work well, very large. So it's like life size.
So we talked about your method of discovery when you're finding subject matter to photograph. Tell us a little bit about how you approach discovery of something like a landscape, because before it was the oranges with a specific location and then the gentleman on the bus. How do you approach landscape discovery?
Well, this is a really good example. This is a huge area. It's the nearest large city, you might say, large meaning like Barstow, California. Well, I drove from Barstow heading toward the Salton Sea in that direction. Well, this I just came upon, and this is actually only one section of this subdivision that was started 12 years before. And the reason I know that is when I found this place, the first, they might say gas station, grocery gas station, I asked, how long has this been there? And the man, he said, well, I moved here 10 years ago, and it was there when I came. And it's never been developed. It's been sitting there like that. So there's another picture here with all the palm trees, the square format palm trees. That's part of this area too. Well, I was just driving by, and this is what I came upon. I mean, I actually walked into this, because the road's over here, I walked into this subdivision, or this area that was developed. You can see this is a huge area, and then whatever they did, and that's the evidence of even this road, you might say, but it's been like suspended for 12 years. So this is one of those things where I didn't know it was out there, but the fact is that you drove out there, and I just happened to hit it at the great time terms of the light, made a picture. And actually I did go back to this one side again, actually, but the first time is when I made this picture. Even though I tried to photograph again the second time, the first time was, it worked, you know. So this is one of those pictures where I had no idea, because I'd never driven out to this area. And we're talking about a huge area that, you know, in terms of time to actually physically drive, because from here to go back to Barstow, I would say it's probably about an hour, just to give you an idea. And there's nothing else out there. There isn't a community. So that to me is like, if somebody was going to think about building this subdivision, there's nothing out there. There's not like you can drive to town in 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or, you know, there was a gas station, and that's about it. So this is a real, and these are obviously for utilities underground, but obviously it's never, and who knows if it'll ever be finished in another 10 years. So that what interests me is just what's left right now at that moment.
We want to thank Anthony for speaking with us. For more information on him, go to anthonyhernandezphotography.com. For more information on the exhibition, go to cartermuseum.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid